Ahoy, my friends. Welcome aboard the Afro Tales podcast. I'm your storyteller, Amon Mazinga. Join me as we explore the tales that grew from the people of Indigenous and African descent in the Americas and the Caribbean. After, come and see me, chef, who will impart upon you a recipe for the story you have just heard. So with no further ado, let us set sail on this new age of exploration. Now let me fly. A story from Mina. I will never forget the day I wanted to fly. My name was Mina then. I lived in Africa. It was many years ago, in 1815. But I can remember the day as if it was yesterday. My life was so happy then. That day, my mother and I were selling baskets and mats for straw at the marketplace. I became troubled when I saw a beautiful bird beating its wings against its wooden cage trying to escape. "You should be free, little bird," I whispered. I opened the cage door and watched as the bird spread its wings and flew away. I wished I could fly above the clouds with it. My mother didn't scold me, even though the man who owned the bird shouted and waved his fist angrily at me. She just pressed some of our baskets into the man's hands to quiet him, and then said these words to me. "You did the right thing, my daughter. No living thing should ever be confined." Later, we crossed the savannah on our walk home. I heard the sound of drum beats. "Mother," I said in anticipation, "do you hear the drums? Will they be dancing tonight, or will the old ones tell their stories?" "No, child. There is no joy in the sound of those drums," said my mother. "Hurry, we must get home." When we arrived at our settlement, day had already dissolved into night. Many had gathered in a circle, their faces lit by the flickering campfire. The council of elders was meeting, presided over my father, the chief. It seems a man from our compound named Dongo was on trial. I was not surprised, for this was not Dongo's first trial. My father challenged Dongo. "It is said that you kidnapped some of our people and sold them as slaves. No one has seen you commit this outrage, but your past leads us to believe you are the only one among us who would harm us. Therefore, you are banished from this settlement, Dongo. Leave here and never come back, or your life will come to a quick and painful end." Two men led Dongo away. The next morning, I played in my family's compound. I hummed the songs my mother sang to me as a baby. Only steps away, my mother ground grain with the other women while humming the same soft melodies of love and family. When I thought I saw the little bird I had freed from its cage at the marketplace flying above me, I followed its flight all the way to the outskirts of the settlement. I flapped my arms as it flapped its wings, as if that could allow me to fly. Therefore, I didn't hear the footsteps that came up behind me, nor did my mother hear my muffled screams as my kidnapper covered my mouth with his hand and dragged me away. All that could be heard echoing through the trees were Dongo's rantings. "Banish me, will you? Banish me?" I will never forget how it felt to be forced to walk, bound, beaten, for endless miles, each step taking me farther away from my mother and father. As I was marched, hundreds of other shackled and stumbling black men, women, and children taken as prisoners of war or kidnapped like me, joined us. We were herded by slave catchers like Dongo across Western Africa up to the edge of the Western Shore. Within days, pale, ghost-like men arrived to transact business with Dongo and the others. The white men took us, a few at a time, in small wooden boats into a large ship anchored offshore. There, they forced us to lie on rough wooden planks, side by side, so close together that there was no more than a whisper and a prayer between us. What I will forever remember is meeting a boy named Amadi, who sat beside me on the foul-smelling ship. Within moments of our meeting, he began to take care of me, and I took care of him. When Amadi was sick with the dreaded fevers, I comforted him by singing the songs my mother taught me. When I tossed and turned with hunger, Amadi often said, "Take some of my gruel, little bird." As he wiped away my tears, Amadi would say, "Raise your head high, Minna. You are the daughter of a prince, the granddaughter of a great king. Yours is a great African heritage. No one can ever take that from you." It was 3 long months before the big wooden ship finally dropped anchor on the shores of a land called America. They herded those of us who had survived the painful voyage off the ship in shackles and chains. Amadi and I stood on a platform in front of many white men and women who bid for us as though we were cattle or goats at the marketplace. A tall white man with the cold eyes of a snake bought Amadi and me for what I later found out was less than $100 each. The man who bought us forced us to call him Master Clemens. Then he took away our names and told us, "Never speak a word of your savage language again." Even though we were just children, Master Clemens put Amadi and me to work in the cotton fields. From dawn to dusk, 6 days a week, until our backs nearly broke under the weight of our labor. Almost overnight, Amadi and I grew from boy and girl to man and woman. As we grew, so did our love for one another. Soon, our master gave us permission to get married. Every slave on the plantation came to watch us jump the broom into marriage at the wedding ceremony. In time, I gave birth to 4 beautiful children. Amadi and I raised our family in a tiny shack with the meager rations our master gave us and these rags on our backs as our reward. Though we lived in misery, captured in a cage of slavery, at least we had each other. But then I thought my life would truly end when my master told me, "I have sold your husband away." It had been years since I'd heard my father's voice, and years since I had felt my mother's caress. And then my husband was taken away before I could even say goodbye. I was never to hear another word from him again. My 4 children were all that I had in life. I had to do all I could to try to keep the rest of my family together. My hopes for my family were denied as soon as my oldest child, Joshua, began to grow toward manhood. By then, everyone could see that my boy had a special gift. It was when he talked to the horses, they understood every word. Master Clemens saw the bond my son had with animals and sought to profit from it. The last time I ever saw Joshua, he was in chains in the back of a wagon. He was on his way to be sold to another plantation, just as his father had been sold away only a year earlier. "Please, Master, don't tear my family apart again. You can't sell Joshua. Don't sell my son," I pleaded. But Master Clemens just pushed me aside. "That boy is more mine than yours," he yelled as the wagon drove away. Word was passed across the country from slave to slave. After an unbearably long time, I found out that Joshua had been sent to the Randolph plantation, hundreds of miles away. Joshua will learn from their blacksmith all about the anvil and the fire. He will probably be hired out to bring more profits to his new master. A promise that Joshua made was also passed on to me. He vowed, "Mama, I will save every penny I am allowed to keep to buy freedom for my whole family." My second child, Sally, was so smart. She taught herself to read by listening to our master's children at their lessons. But in Georgia, it was against the law for a slave to know how to read. So Master Clemens took a whip to my Sally. She stood there and took the lashings and didn't even cry. That child has the will of iron and a head that won't be bowed. I feared for her. That's no way for a slave to be. So I woke Sally one night, hugged her, and put her in the arms of friends who would risk their lives taking my child up north to freedom. I cry every time I hear the song they sang when I saw her for the very last time. They were signaling to the other escaping slaves to steal away. Months later, I received a letter. I had to find someone to read it to me. The moment I first heard it, I memorized every word. "Mama, please don't worry about me. I am safe. Though our travels were not easy, for 6 weeks we forded streams and walked hundreds of miles at night, always following the North Star. During the day, we fell asleep in cold, wet, dark caves as we hid from slave catchers. Free black people and sometimes even white people offered us refuge. Mama, you should have seen how happy we were when we arrived at the rock with the P that told us we were at the Mason-Dixon line. We knew that in the state of Pennsylvania, we could finally be free. I love you, Mama. Sally." My boy Mason was smart like his sister and talented like his brother. He had a gift, but it wasn't for how fast he could pick a row of cotton. That boy could take the banjo his daddy made and play it till even the birds tried to dance. But my master saw the joy we found in Mason's music. He raised his whip to my boy to stop his banjo playing. And I knew right then that if Mason stayed on this plantation, he would only become a beaten, broken slave in the fields. I sent word up north to Sally, the daughter I had not seen in 6 winters. In due time, she answered my prayers. A strange black man came to our door and said, "I have come to help Mason steal away." I waited 6 months to hear what had become of my son. Then I found this note slipped under my cabin door. "Mama, Mason has been taken to Florida. to live with a Seminole Indian family. For now, Mama, that is the best I can do to help Mason be free. Don't worry, somehow I'll find a way to bring our family back together again. Your loving daughter, Sally. Katie is my last child. She's my youngest. My dearest Katie, I do not know what I will do if she's ever taken from me. Katie is now working in the plantation's big house. She has humbled herself to Master Clement's daughter. Our young mistress has told my daughter that neither she nor I will be sold if Katie remains her dutiful servant. I'm telling my last child the story of her heritage, the story my own parents once told me. I'm showing her how to make beautiful quilts and pottery from coils of red Georgia clay, like the ones I made as a child in Africa. We will probably never be released from this prison of slavery and rise to freedom like my Sally and my Mason. But Katie and I will somehow find comfort in our lives. Katie and I often walk together to the boundaries of the Clemens plantation. As we walk, we hear singing. And if I try real hard, I almost hear my mother's voice. The women are singing that old hymn, "Now Let Me Fly," a song about a promised land that slaves can only find up in heaven. When I hear that old song, I search the sky for that little African bird, and I dream of freedom. The end. Wow. So, again, another wonderful story about freedom. The story, Now Let Me Fly, the story of a slave family, came from Dolores Johnson, and she did a wonderful job putting this together. In this story, you see that her children were forced to find different ways to freedom. So a little where are they now type of thing, or where did they end up? Joshua, although, being a blacksmith, he wasn't able to buy his family's freedom. Most slaves weren't able to buy their family's freedom. He was able to get a family and raise his own and pass his skills and knowledge on to his descendants. Sally spent her life speaking out against slavery and helping bring hundreds of slaves out of bondage in the South. Mason, like many fugitive slaves going down to Florida, found new life with the Seminole Indians until they were uprooted in 1842, relocated to Oklahoma, where his new family lived in the remainder of his life as a Seminole brave. Mina and Katie and their descendants continued their brutal existence on the Clemens plantation until the end of the Civil War, some 20 years later, and the subsequent ratification of the 13th Amendment in December of 1865, which finally made all African American men, women, and children free. These stories are important to the African American community, and I don't want anybody thinking that as I've heard recently, that, oh no, there were no enslaved people from Africa. There were. There are plenty more than it should ever be. And although some of us of the African American descent can trace our lineage to indigenous people of Americas, those same can also trace their lineage to indigenous people of Africa. Okay? One does not negate the other. One truth does not make another truth a lie. Native Americans were enslaved. Africans were enslaved here in the Americas. That's fact. That's true. They mingled with each other. They had children together because they were enslaved together. They fought for freedom together, and they lived together, and they loved each other. Okay? Let that be known. Let that be understood. Native Americans and Africans that were enslaved in the Americas both fought for their freedom together in many situations. Being a mom, you do everything. Being a parent, a real parent, a loving parent, you do everything you can to ensure your child has a better life than you. My mom did it for me, and hopefully I'm doing it for mine. I won't know until they're out on their own and they start living their lives the way they choose to. I hope you as a parent are doing your very, very best to ensure that your child is going to have a better life than you. Now, what they choose once they are out of your home is on them. As long as you're doing everything you can, that's all you can do. You know what I mean? That's all you can do. Love your children. Love yourself. Forgive your children. Forgive yourself. Just do your best to guide them. Because being a parent, there is no manual. There is no book. There's nothing. I mean, I know people have tried to write them, but no. There's no real book for this. I don't care what the parent gurus try to pander off to us. There isn't one. Every child is different. Every child has its own. Even if you have five children in the same household, they are all different people. And no book can prepare you for that. All right? So, anyway, let's go see Chef. He's going to have a wonderful recipe inspired by this story. And until we meet again for the next story, remember, thank you for coming on this journey. Thank you for everything you do for me and for yourselves and for your loved ones. And as always, have a blessed day.
Welcome, my friends, to the Galley. I am your chef, and today we have a wonderful recipe inspired by the story you have just heard. Today, we will be creating pulled pork. Now, what will you need for this here recipe? 1 tablespoon chili powder, 1 tablespoon paprika, 1 tablespoon garlic powder, 2 teaspoons of thyme, 1 tablespoon onion powder, 1 teaspoon freshly ground black pepper, half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 2 to 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, even though I know some of you will put more. 1 pork shoulder roast, 6 to 7 pounds, and 4 onions cut into halves. Now, how do we put this together? Easy. First, combine everything except the pork shoulder and onions in a small bowl. Then, put the roast in a non-reactive dish or pan and generously rub the seasonings all over the pork shoulder. The best you can, of course. Now you can cover the top with saran wrap and put it in the fridge overnight and allow the flavors to penetrate. This here is optional, but highly recommended. Now, preheat the oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 degrees Celsius. Add the halved onions in a deep baking dish. Gently put the seasoned pork on top and cover it. Cook for 6 to 7 hours. You may uncover it for the last hour to make it a little crispy. Now, you can shred it with 2 forks, or if you have a shredder, you can do that. Then serve it on buns for sliders, the best buns, or Hawaiian sweet rolls. Or you can put it in burritos and tacos. You may also skim off the fat if you want to use the liquid, then pour it on the pulled pork to serve as a main dish. And that is it, my friends. Now, go make this recipe yours. And until I have another wonderful recipe for you, remember Mina and her journeys to free her children. And until next time, my friends, as always, enjoy.
Thank you, my friends, for coming on this voyage. Thanks to Art by Chalet for the logo, episode, and shirt designs. You can get t-shirts and other items on tpublic.com. You can contact me on all socials at AfroTalesCast. That's AfroTalesCast. And email me at AfroTalesCast@gmail.com. You may also become a benefactor by simply sharing with any and everyone, giving a thumbs up, a 5-star rating and review in your podcast app of choice, or simply donating on Patreon or Ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com. So until we meet again, may your winds be fair and your seas follow.